The council expected anger. They expected protest. They expected the humans to beg. Instead, the human delegation stood up, thanked them politely, and walked out. No threats. No war. Just silence. And within hours, the galaxy began to break. The Grand Chamber, a relic of 12,000 years of Concord history, hummed with the faint buzz of recycled air and procedural lighting. But the energy that normally defined it, the rigid hierarchy, the subtle jockeying for influence, the predictable cadence of debate, was gone. Seats once occupied by humans sat empty, their polished desks reflecting the sterile overhead lights. Ambassador Tokvasan of the Kirith Dominion leaned back, trying to process what had just happened. It was inconceivable. The humans had always been methodical, polite, eager to integrate. They had volunteered for border patrols, medical missions, infrastructure surveys, work no other species wanted to touch, and they had always done it without complaint. And now, with the quietest of gestures, they had removed themselves entirely from the equation. Across the chamber, the elder species exchanged glances. The Dresh, encased in their sealed atmospheric pods, hummed in mechanical disapproval, their translator units flickering nervously. The Owlery maintained their teal glow of self-satisfaction, though subtle tension crept along the edges of their mandibles. The Meyer species, perched in the upper galleries, had no idea how to react. To them, the Concord was an immutable institution. No civilization had ever left it without consequence. And yet, the humans had done just that, without demands, without threats, without a single loud protest. Elena Vasquez led them with calm precision, her gaze steady as she guided her delegation through the chamber doors. Every folder was closed, every data pad secured, every bag already packed. It was as though they had known this day was coming for decades, and now it was here. Outside the chamber, the corridors normally crowded with aides and diplomats were eerily quiet. Word of the walkout spread faster than any official message could. Systems that relied on human engineering and maintenance trade corridors, medical stations, border patrol routes were suddenly left unmanaged. The Concord had always counted on humans to quietly hold the galaxy together. For decades, human crews maintained emergent navigation corridors, purified water systems on distant colonies, and staffed scientific observatories. These acts had been unglamorous, invisible to most of the elder species, but they were essential. And now, with the humans gone, every unremarkable cog in the Concord machinery began to falter. Facilitator Owen, the bioluminescent coordinator of the session, floated in the center of the chamber, eyes cycling through shades of blue, green, and an unfamiliar amber. Procedural order demanded he call a recess, but he barely remembered the rules. He watched the empty desks where the humans had been, a cold realization settling into him. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't an emotional outburst from a young, untested species. This was deliberate, calculated, and the galaxy had never been prepared for it. The first reports began trickling in. Trade shipments delayed, medical relief postponed, border patrols unstaffed. By the time the elder species fully understood the scale of what had happened, the ripple effects were already spreading, touching every corner of Concord space. Civilization as they knew it was beginning to fracture, and no one could yet comprehend the depth of the vacuum the humans had left behind. The first signs of chaos were subtle. Systems designed for efficiency began to lag. Communication arrays blinked offline, rerouting messages hours behind schedule. On the outer rim, the colonies noticed the absence first. Starports once bustling with human engineers became silent, docks unmanned, cargo ships delayed indefinitely. Automated systems attempted to compensate, but the humans had always been the ones to troubleshoot when algorithms failed. Without them, minor malfunctions cascaded into major disruptions. A water purification station on Tyrian 4 failed, leaving half the population without clean water. Medical drones, programmed to monitor remote settlements, went offline when their maintenance routines were interrupted. The galaxy had been stable for centuries, but it had relied on humans as the silent backbone, the ones no one thanked. No one even noticed until now. The elder species panicked behind closed doors. The Kirith Dominion convened emergency sessions. Orders were issued, warnings sent, fleets repositioned, but no human vessels remained within Concord control. Helena Vasquez had anticipated every contingency. The humans didn't strike. They didn't sabotage. They didn't negotiate. They simply withdrew. And in doing so, they had turned the galaxy's dependence into its vulnerability. The Concord, a union of countless civilizations and technologies, realized with horror that it had underestimated the humans' quiet power. It was the absence of force, the absence of threat, that caused the most damage. The galaxy had been running on the assumption that humans would always act, always intervene, always stabilize. That assumption was now gone. In the midst of the growing panic, rumors began to spread. Some claimed human engineers were secretly seeding colonies with autonomous stabilizers, advanced AI, and self-repairing systems. Others whispered that the humans had moved their efforts to territories beyond the reach of the Concord, places no elder species had charted. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. The Alari, known for their pride, sent envoys to nearby systems, requesting updates on trade networks and supply chains. The Dresh tried to assert control over emerging conflicts, but their methods were too rigid, too centralized. The humans had never fought like other species. They had solved problems quietly, efficiently, and invisibly. And now, by leaving, they had weaponized the absence of their cooperation. Meanwhile, the human fleet moved with purpose, silent and unthreatening. They avoided borders, bypassed conflict zones, and operated in a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. Helena Vasquez issued instructions calmly from the flagship bridge, her voice steady over the comms as human crews initiated routines designed to observe without interference. For decades, they have studied the Concord, cataloged its dependencies, mapped its inefficiencies. Now, in their absence, the weaknesses they had silently recorded were exposed in real time. Every delayed shipment, every unmanned station, every faltering fleet was a reflection of human foresight and restraint. There was no vengeance, no hostility, only the quiet assertion of autonomy. And the galaxy trembled in response. As hours turned into days, minor incidents escalated into systemic failures. Trade convoys missed critical checkpoints, medical relief to outbreak zones faltered, and small skirmishes between neighboring species spiraled without human mediation. Emergency communications were clogged, protocols ignored, and the Concord's governing council became paralyzed with indecision. Every attempt to intervene only highlighted the depth of their reliance. The human withdrawal was not an act of aggression, yet it had the force of one. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. The humans had power not in war, not in threats, but in the simple, undeniable fact that their absence alone could unravel centuries of careful order. By the third day, the full scale of disruption became undeniable. Supply lines that had once moved with the efficiency of clockwork were now caught in endless bottlenecks. Starports designed to handle thousands of ships simultaneously were reduced to chaos, their automated systems floundering without the humans who had silently ensured their reliability. On Lorvax Prime, food shipments meant for 10,000 colonists sat in storage bays, spoiling under malfunctioning climate controls. The elders debated sending fleets to intervene, but every proposal collapsed under its own complexity. The humans had long been the linchpin of interstellar stability, the unseen operators who prevented small issues from snowballing into catastrophe. Now, without them, The galaxy's delicate balance began to crumble. Political tensions escalated faster than anyone could anticipate. Neighboring systems, previously held in uneasy peace by human diplomacy, now flared with suspicion and hostility. The Jirani governors accused the Tellurians of sabotaging a transport route, while the Tellurians blamed the Kirith Dominion for hoarding resources. Minor skirmishes erupted into violent confrontations, and the elder races scrambled to restore order. Helena Vasquez, observing from her flagship, noted each escalation with clinical precision. The humans had not orchestrated these conflicts, nor had they directly interfered. The very fact that they were absent, the silence they left behind, was enough to ignite chaos. It was a subtle, terrifying power, one that the Concord had never imagined could exist without an actual strike. Meanwhile, the humans themselves were not idle. Outposts in uncharted sectors began to receive shipments of advanced technology, self-repairing drones, energy-efficient life support systems, and autonomous medical facilities, all designed to operate independently of the Concord's failing infrastructure. While the galaxy panicked, humans quietly prepared for what came next, a subtle reclamation of control not through violence, but through planning, innovation, and patience. Helena's strategy was simple. Never intervene directly, never fight, but ensure that when the moment came, humans could step back in with authority over the broken systems. Every minor failure, every skirmish, every diplomatic blunder only strengthened the humans' position. The galaxy was learning, painfully, that the true power of humanity lay not in warships or weapons, but in competence, foresight, and restraint. The elder races struggled to understand this. In council chambers, debates grew heated and desperate. "Send the fleet," cried one ambassador, her voice cracking with frustration. "We cannot wait for humans to act. They have abandoned us." Another countered, "If we interfere without coordination, the systems may collapse entirely. We need their guidance." The paradox gnawed at every species. The humans were powerless to harm, yet their absence was lethal. The Concord had long assumed that control meant power, but for the first time, control seemed fragile, dependent on the silent, meticulous work of a species it had consistently underestimated. Every day the humans stayed away. The galaxy's reliance became more obvious and more dangerous. Amid this chaos, whispers of human observation spread among the younger races. Scouts reported sightings of human ships navigating uncharted sectors, yet never engaging in conflict. Some claimed that humans were cataloging every failure, every misstep, every moment the Concord floundered. Others said the humans were seeding the galaxy with advanced technology, subtly nudging weaker species towards stability without revealing themselves. Whatever the truth, fear of the unknown added another layer of tension. The humans had become both invisible and omnipresent, a silent force that the galaxy could neither confront nor predict. By simply standing aside, humanity had rewritten the rules of power. The Concord's greatest threat was no longer rebellion or invasion. It was absence itself. By the end of the first week, entire star systems teetered on the brink of collapse. Hyperlane traffic, once meticulously coordinated, had descended into chaos. Ships collided in narrow lanes, automated defense grids misfired, and planetary infrastructure faltered under the weight of unanticipated demand. The elder races realized, too late, that humans had been the unseen stabilizers of the galactic order. Their absence wasn't an act of aggression, but its effects were indistinguishable from a full-scale war. Every sector that had depended on human oversight was unraveling simultaneously, creating a ripple effect that spread faster than anyone could control. Councils were called in emergency sessions, but debates turned into arguments into blame, and blame into paralysis. No fleet, no weapon, no treaty could mend the growing fractures. The galaxy's backbone, the human thread, had quietly disappeared, leaving only the tension of fragility in its place. Elena Vasquez observed the disintegration with methodical patience. From the bridge of her flagship, she watched holographic feeds of starports shutting down, colonies running out of essential supplies, and defensive stations losing synchronization. No human intervened directly. They were everywhere and nowhere, a network of silent observers and discreet operatives, preparing for the moment the galaxy could no longer maintain itself. Each failure, each miscalculation, each petty conflict among alien factions further proved their point. The Concord's authority was superficial, dependent on humans for execution. Every failed communication, every botched supply run, and every misrouted convoy silently demonstrated humanity's indispensable role. It was a lesson in patience and subtlety, one that no laser or missile could have conveyed as effectively. As panic spread, the younger species began to react unpredictably. Systems that had relied on human engineers attempted makeshift solutions. Girani mechanics jury-rigged power grids. Tellurians attempted to reprogram automated logistics drones. And Kirith diplomats tried to broker agreements without mediation. The results were chaotic and often deadly. Entire cities on remote planets went dark when energy relays failed, and vital data centers suffered irrecoverable losses due to improper backups. Reports of small-scale civil unrest began trickling into council feeds. Humanity's strategy was not to control directly, but to expose the inefficiency and overconfidence of the elder races. Every mistake became a tool, every misstep a lesson, and every collapse a reinforcement of the humans' quiet supremacy. Meanwhile, subtle human interventions began in secret. Advanced medical units arrived on dying colonies, not through fleet deployments, but via stealthy autonomous drones. Energy stabilizers rebooted failing reactors without drawing attention. Supply caches appeared on worlds that were technically unreachable, providing relief before disaster could spiral completely out of control. No human commander claimed responsibility. No orders were issued. These acts were calculated, almost surgical, designed to demonstrate capability without overt domination. The galaxy's attention, however, remained fixated on failures. Humans had created a paradox. They could restore life and order without ever being acknowledged. Power had shifted, not through force, but through the demonstration of competence and restraint. At the council, arguments grew desperate. "We cannot survive without them," a Kirith ambassador admitted reluctantly, his words trembling with unease. "They are the only ones who can manage the systems we cannot." Yet they refused to lead. Across the chamber, murmurs of frustration spread. The elders had always equated leadership with authority, but they now faced a stark reality. Humans wielded influence through inaction. Their silence carried more weight than 1,000 fleets. The human delegation had taught the galaxy a lesson in humility, patience, and strategic restraint. In the absence of traditional threats, they had proven themselves indispensable. And the Concord, for all its centuries of governance, realized that control was nothing without competence. By the second month, entire sectors were teetering on the edge of collapse. Trade routes, once meticulously maintained, were now clogged with stranded freighters and malfunctioning cargo drones. Supply chains for critical resources, oxygen, food, medical supplies, and fuel had broken down entirely in many outer colonies. Planetary governments attempted improvisation, but every effort revealed their dependence on human oversight. Even minor delays escalated into systemic crises. Hospitals reported shortages in essential medicines. Mining operations halted as power grids failed, and communication arrays flickered in and out across distant worlds. Humanity's absence, silent and deliberate, had exposed the fragility of a galaxy that prided itself on strength and control. The lesson was clear. They had underestimated humans, and now the galaxy paid the price. Elena Vasquez continued to observe, her calm demeanor unshaken as chaos multiplied. She studied the ripple effects in real time, noting every failure and every system that faltered without human guidance. Her team of operatives remained invisible, intervening subtly where collapse risked total destruction, but always in a way that reinforced human indispensability without exposing their presence. On one remote industrial world, for instance, failing fusion reactors were stabilized just in time by autonomous drones, preventing catastrophic chain reactions. No one saw the intervention, yet the local engineers praised their luck, never realizing who had actually saved them. Each subtle act further cemented humans as the silent arbiters of survival, a power measured not by aggression, but by competence and foresight. Meanwhile, the council was paralyzed. Elder representatives convened emergency meetings, but debates turned into finger-pointing. It was arrogance to assume we could manage without them, one elder admitted in private, voice tight with frustration. The Concord had spent millennia believing authority equated to control. Yet the galaxy now demonstrated that competence mattered far more than rank. Young species, once ambitious and rebellious, began forming ad hoc coalitions to cover gaps in logistics and defense. But even their collective effort fell short. Disasters multiplied, and with each passing day, the human strategy unfolded like a lesson in patience and strategic restraint. The galaxy was learning, painfully and unwillingly, that true power often lay in subtlety, not force. Amid the chaos, humans themselves remained mostly in the shadows. Communications were rare, precise, and measured. No overt threats were issued, no fleets launched, no demands made. They allowed the galaxy to flounder, to stumble, to reveal its weakness under pressure. Yet wherever collapse risked permanent catastrophe, discreet interventions prevented irreversible loss. It was a paradox. Total disruption and meticulous preservation existed simultaneously, reinforcing humanity's position without a single act of conventional warfare. Civilizations that once considered humans fragile or inconsequential now whispered their name with a mixture of awe and fear. The lesson had been delivered, quietly but unmistakably. And yet, for all the subtlety, not everyone understood. Some council members, blinded by pride or arrogance, continued to attempt conventional solutions, massive military mobilizations, hasty treaties, and risky economic gambits. All failed. Fleets collided, convoys were lost, and fragile alliances crumbled under pressure. Each failure broadcast, silently and deliberately, the human's point. Order cannot be imposed without understanding, and leadership without competence is meaningless. Helena watched it all unfold like a grand experiment. She had no intention of saving those who refused to learn, only guiding the galaxy to the threshold where understanding became unavoidable. The human strategy was simple in design, but devastating in execution. Let the galaxy stumble until it begged for the guidance it had once dismissed. By the fourth month, the galaxy's fractures had deepened. Entire star systems teetered on the edge of collapse, and communication networks were fragmented beyond repair. Even the most technologically advanced civilizations struggled to coordinate basic survival efforts. Economies that had flourished for centuries were now reduced to barter and resource scavenging. Energy grids failed unpredictably, leaving planets in darkness for days, while food and medical shortages sparked civil unrest in colonies previously deemed unshackable. Every misstep, every failure, highlighted the humans' unseen influence. Their absence had created chaos, yet their selective interventions ensured the galaxy did not completely implode. It was a cruel balance, a masterclass in controlled disruption. Helena Vasquez monitored the unfolding crises with a surgeon's precision. Each collapse, each mismanaged crisis, was an opportunity for observation, learning, and subtle recalibration. Her operatives were everywhere, invisible yet effective, preventing total annihilation while allowing maximum stress to ripple through galactic societies. On a distant mining planet, for instance, critical life support systems were remotely stabilized just moments before catastrophic failure. Engineers celebrated their luck, oblivious to the human hand that had intervened. These acts, small but decisive, reinforced the human's silent authority. No war, no threats, no coercion, just an invisible hand guiding the galaxy through the consequences of its own hubris. The Council, meanwhile, was fracturing under the pressure. Elder representatives bickered endlessly, unable to agree on solutions as entire sectors fell into disorder. Some proposed desperate military campaigns, while others demanded emergency resource sharing, but none addressed the underlying truth. The galaxy could not function without humans. Yet pride and old hierarchies made admitting that truth impossible. As chaos spread, younger species began forming temporary alliances to patch failing systems, but even their best efforts were piecemeal and insufficient. Each failure only underscored the human's lesson. Competence, foresight, and adaptability trump power, rank, or aggression. Back in human space, the delegation remained deliberate in its restraint. Communications were minimal, their tone measured, polite, and always non-confrontational. No demands were made, no ultimatums issued. Humanity's power was expressed not in fleets or weapons, but in strategy and patience. The galaxy, left to its own devices, was forced to confront its vulnerabilities. Even as civilizations scrambled to cope with shortages, failures, and political instability, subtle human interventions prevented total collapse. By letting the galaxy stumble, the humans ensured that every society would eventually understand the consequences of underestimating them. Within months, whispers of human influence reached even the farthest colonies. Stories spread of miraculous recoveries and inexplicable stability in the midst of chaos. Planets once proud and self-sufficient now quietly acknowledged the invisible guidance of humanity. Fear and respect grew in tandem. Leaders who had once dismissed the humans as inconsequential were now forced to reconsider their assumptions. The silent lesson was unmissable. Humans did not need war to command influence. Competence and calculated restraint were more powerful than any weapon in the galaxy. Helena observed it all with quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was learning, and resistance was futile, not because humans sought dominance, but because the galaxy had no choice but to rely on them. By the fourth month, the galaxy's fractures had deepened. Entire star systems teetered on the edge of collapse, and communication networks were fragmented beyond repair. Even the most technologically advanced civilizations struggled to coordinate basic survival efforts. Economies that had flourished for centuries were now reduced to barter and resource scavenging. Energy grids failed unpredictably, leaving planets in darkness for days, while food and medical shortages sparked civil unrest in colonies previously deemed unshackable. Every misstep, every failure, highlighted the humans' unseen influence. Their absence had created chaos, yet their selective interventions ensured the galaxy did not completely implode. It was a cruel balance, a masterclass in controlled disruption. Helena Vasquez monitored the unfolding crises with a surgeon's precision. Each collapse, each mismanaged crisis, was an opportunity for observation, learning, and subtle recalibration. Her operatives were everywhere, invisible yet effective, preventing total annihilation while allowing maximum stress to ripple through galactic societies. On a distant mining planet, for instance, critical life support systems were remotely stabilized just moments before catastrophic failure. Engineers celebrated their luck, oblivious to the human hand that had intervened. These acts, small but decisive, reinforced the human's silent authority. No war, no threats, no coercion, just an invisible hand guiding the galaxy through the consequences of its own hubris. The Council, meanwhile, was fracturing under the pressure. Elder representatives bickered endlessly, unable to agree on solutions as entire sectors fell into disorder. Some proposed desperate military campaigns, while others demanded emergency resource sharing, but none addressed the underlying truth. The galaxy could not function without humans. Yet pride and old hierarchies made admitting that truth impossible. As chaos spread, younger species began forming temporary alliances to patch failing systems. But even their best efforts were piecemeal and insufficient. Each failure only underscored the human's lesson. Competence, foresight, and adaptability trump power, rank, or aggression. Back in human space, the delegation remained deliberate in its restraint. Communications were minimal, their tone measured, polite, and always non-confrontational. No demands were made, no ultimatums issued. Humanity's power was expressed not in fleets or weapons, but in strategy and patience. The galaxy, left to its own devices, was forced to confront its vulnerabilities. Even as civilizations scrambled to cope with shortages, failures, and political instability, subtle human interventions prevented total collapse. By letting the galaxy stumble, the humans ensured that every society would eventually understand the consequences of underestimating them. Within months, whispers of human influence reached even the farthest colonies. Stories spread of miraculous recoveries and inexplicable stability in the midst of chaos. Planets once proud and self-sufficient now quietly acknowledged the invisible guidance of humanity. Fear and respect grew in tandem. Leaders who had once dismissed the humans as inconsequential were now forced to reconsider their assumptions. The silent lesson was unmissable. Humans did not need war to command influence. Competence and calculated restraint were more powerful than any weapon in the galaxy. Helena observed it all with quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was learning, and resistance was futile, not because humans sought dominance, but because the galaxy had no choice but to rely on them. By the 8th month, the galaxy's structure was unrecognizable to those who had once held dominion. Trade networks that had relied on intimidation now functioned seamlessly because someone had subtly corrected inefficiencies before they became crises. Entire fleets meant for war were reassigned quietly to exploration and support missions. Planets once isolated by political strife began to communicate directly, sharing resources and knowledge in a rhythm orchestrated by invisible human planning. No one knew exactly why these sudden shifts were happening, but the pattern was undeniable. The galaxy was being rewritten in humanity's image, not by force but by precision. Hall and his team had evolved their strategy. They no longer intervened in every disaster. Instead, they allowed minor crises to occur, creating controlled instability that exposed weak leadership and revealed societies most adaptable to change. It was a delicate balance. Too much interference would reveal their hand. Too little risked genuine collapse. Yet the humans excelled at this invisible guidance. Every planetary government, every interstellar alliance, every star-faring corporation was subtly nudged toward efficiency, cooperation, and strategic foresight. Entire civilizations began to improve, unaware that their successes were not entirely their own. Humanity had become the silent tutor of the galaxy. Amid this transformation, cracks appeared in the Council. Some factions openly resisted, attempting covert operations to uncover human influence. Their attempts failed spectacularly. Communications were rerouted, sabotage averted, and even the smallest manipulations corrected before they could take effect. Humans had anticipated every possible move. Every contingency had a counter. The Council's pride faltered as fear took root. Discussions of negotiation or retaliation became muted whispers, because no one wanted to provoke a civilization whose reach they could not see. Humanity's power had transcended traditional measures. It was a mastery of control without confrontation. Meanwhile, Rumors among independent star systems evolved into legend. Stories circulated of humans solving problems that seemed insurmountable. Critical reactor malfunctions stopped without warning. Resources appeared where shortages had been predicted. And conflicts dissolved before they escalated. The tales grew in magnitude, blending fact with speculation, yet each carried a kernel of truth. Humans were no longer just diplomats or observers. They were myth incarnate, their presence felt in every corner of space without being named. Fear and admiration merged into a cautious reverence. The galaxy had begun to bend, silently and irrevocably, to human design. As the 8th month drew to a close, humanity's influence became almost philosophical. Entire civilizations started questioning their values, reassessing priorities, and reevaluating systems of governance. Education, innovation, and problem-solving took precedence over conquest and greed. Humanity had demonstrated that real power lay not in weapons or armies, but in foresight, competence, and patience. And yet the humans remained quiet, never issuing demands, never celebrating their victories, simply allowing the galaxy to adjust to a new reality, one in which they were the unseen architects of survival. The Council, once confident in its authority, now understood with quiet dread that the galaxy's fate had been rewritten, and the authors were silent. By the 9th month, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Star systems that had once been isolated now functioned as synchronized networks, sharing technology, resources, and intelligence. Entire fleets that had been poised for conquest were decommissioned or reassigned to humanitarian and exploratory missions. Humanity's silent guidance had shifted the balance of power entirely, not through violence, but by reshaping priorities and decision-making across hundreds of worlds. Leaders whispered about the invisible hand that seemed to correct every mistake, elevate every potential, and anticipate every crisis. The Council, once confident in its control, was now paralyzed by uncertainty. Human delegates, still outwardly composed, monitored progress through data streams and subtle interventions. Every shift in policy, every technological breakthrough, every alliance formed was the result of carefully calculated nudges. Even when conflicts flared, humans allowed them to unfold just enough to teach lessons, but always steered outcomes toward stability. Planets began to thrive, not because they had discovered solutions themselves, but because humanity had engineered an environment in which the best choices were inevitable. The galaxy was learning, evolving, and improving under invisible tutelage, and none of its inhabitants fully realized it. The Council's attempts to resist became desperate. Covert operations, espionage, and sabotage failed repeatedly, as if the humans could predict each move before it happened. Entire fleets vanished on reconnaissance missions without explanation, only to reappear months later, their crews unharmed but shaken. The Council had underestimated humans' patience and foresight. They had assumed aggression was the only form of power, and that humans would respond with anger if provoked. Instead, humans had redefined power itself quietly, invisibly, and unassailably. The galaxy had learned that the greatest threat was not weapons or armies, but a civilization whose intelligence, strategy, and patience were unmatched. By the end of the 9th month, the galaxy was no longer the same. Conflicts that had persisted for centuries were resolved. Economies were stabilized, and alliances formed based on mutual benefit rather than coercion. Every civilization had been elevated, yet none could claim credit, and none could challenge the architects of this new order. Humans had proven that real dominance did not require violence, threats, or even recognition. It required vision, patience, and understanding of systems far greater than any one species. The Council's authority had eroded not with a single battle or declaration, but with the quiet certainty that humanity was already shaping the future, and no force could stop them. The stage was set. The galaxy, once a web of fear and ambition, had been subtly rewritten. The silent architects watched from the edges, knowing that their ultimate plan, their true strategy, was only just beginning to reveal itself. By the 10th month, the galaxy no longer whispered about humanity. It acknowledged them silently in every decision, every strategy, every expansion. Entire civilizations that had once prepared for war now redirected resources toward exploration, innovation, and cooperation. The Council, which had once imagined themselves untouchable, now found themselves obsolete, their authority replaced by a subtle, omnipresent order humans had engineered. Ships that had carried weapons now carried knowledge, and armies once designed. To conquer now worked to heal planets and stabilize societies. Humanity's influence was everywhere and nowhere at once. No human had demanded recognition. No banners flew across planets, and no proclamations echoed in council halls. Yet every system, every council decision, every policy enacted bore the invisible fingerprints of human strategy. Wars stopped not because humans fought, but because they had anticipated every potential spark and removed the conditions for conflict before it could flare. Civilizations thrived not by their own design, but within the ecosystem humanity had quietly nurtured. The Council realized the truth too late. Humans had never relied on weapons, threats, or intimidation. Their power was patience, foresight, and precision. They had taught the galaxy to survive and cooperate, and in doing so, had made themselves indispensable. Any attempt to resist was futile, as humans had already anticipated and adapted to every possible countermeasure. The galaxy had been rewritten not through chaos, but through meticulous planning, silent guidance, and unrelenting calm. By the end of the 10th month, there were no wars, no open rebellions, no copes, only progress, cooperation, and subtle unity. Humans had achieved what no species had ever done. They had reshaped an entire galaxy without firing a single shot, without demanding fear, respect, or recognition. The silent delegation that had walked out of the council chambers months ago had now become the invisible heartbeat of a new era. The galaxy would remember them not as conquerors, but as architects of survival, prosperity, and harmony, and no force could ever undo what they had set in motion. And in that silence, as stars shone across countless systems, the humans remained. Calm observers, knowing the galaxy's ultimate potential had only just begun to unfold. Their work was complete, but its consequences would echo forever.